I'm going to do a sketchbook tour, but I'm going to try to keep it quick because I can't have the video too long because my internet takes too long to upload things. So I can finish off this sketchbook and then start the new one properly, although I've already started experimenting in the new one. And it's sad because I can't seem to find more at Dollarama, but I love this type of craft tone sketchbook. I have other craft paper, however. Began March 3rd, 2018, and I'm about to do the last page after, hopefully in this video. There's a lot of mixed media pieces in here where I use different art media. There's a test page. I also have this loose page so I could check the different Copic marker warm gray and some of the swatches, which I cut out from the back. This is an NPC I made up in colored pencil. And this one is a study from an actual ginger root I bought, and this is a study from a photo. Most of the things in here are based on public domain images or imagination, though there's a little bit of fan art. Some things I came back and did later. This I did a long time ago, whereas this I sketched back in 2018 but didn't paint until recently. The metallic paints in here are fine text. There's also gouache and watercolor. This is a 3-color challenge where I chose randomly, back when I only had Reeves and Hemi gouache. This is from when I got the Hemi gouache. Griffin. This picture was even worse before, if you can believe it, but I still don't like it, but I tried to salvage it. This is a gesso test. I gessoed the page and then went over it with some different gelatos I got before. A Chick in gouache. Some more bird studies in gouache. This fan art page is Zelda fan art. These two are based on an art book I got, and this one is just the Master Cycle Zero. I only painted in gouache the glowing areas. This one also has glow-in-the-dark paint applied, very strong glow-in-the-dark paint, so it actually does glow. A lot of the large white things you see are my white ink pen. The Faber-Castell Pit, also gel pen. There's also Inkjoy, different fine liners, Pitt artist pens, and other art fine liners, cold erase pencils. Later there will be Stabilo all pencils, various Copic markers, and gouache, and Finetec metallic paints, and various watercolors. This book doesn't really have much pencil except as a base or underlayer. So these ones here are various fish. This is a familiar from a player. These ones here are done with just certain things, which is fine liners, a little bit of fine liners, the big white Pitt pen, the gel pen, and warm gray Copic markers. And everything in here that's this sort of style tends to be done with those things. So this as well, the unicorn and the underwater scene. This red dragon, even though there's no color. This was for Inktober back in 2018. I kept thinking of tadpoles for a week. Not all of the Inktober's are in here. I spread them through different locations. This sheep study. This bottle for Inktober 2018. I was following the official prompts. This one is Scorched for the Inktober 2018. Prickly for the Inktober 2018. Now for this one, I drew the dinosaur way back, but I only recently finally added the crocodilian. And the thing about that is I always intended to add it, so I'm happy I finally did it. It feels very satisfying. I also did Dinovember in 2018, and this is the Diatrauma, which was just in general paleo art, not just dinosaurs. Now, a lot of these abstract acrylic paintings that are featured in here are using up extra paint. The dark colors here were one day, the white was a different day, and the other colors here were another day, and that's so that the paint doesn't go to waste, because when acrylic paint dries, it's gone forever. This was just a sudden inspiration, and it's done with a lot of mixed media. Metallic gel pens, different Copic markers, fine liners, gel pens. This was to use up paint that would be wasted. I could put something on top, but I never really did. I kind of like the plain blue page. These are gouache bird studies. This is another one of those grayscale tone with maybe a little bit of brown fine liner. This is, I believe, Pitt Artist Pens. This is actually a lot of mixed media for this little cover. This is a Hippocampus done primarily in watercolor with a bit of gouache. I really do like this one. I like a lot of the stuff in here. I love this type of sketchbook, so I actually try to do good work in it. This one is a lot of mixed media, and I came back to it over time. It took over a year. Some of these artworks I do a little bit, and I come back later, and some of them I do all at once. This was originally an acrylic extra paint, so I don't waste it painting, which is just a page. And then about a year later, I came back in with gouache and painted an aboleth, which is a tabletop role-playing monster, you know, from like Dungeons and Dragons. Queen Novo was originally a test after watching the My Little Pony movie, which has some good things about it and a bunch of bad things about it. I was testing out my no-name brand sort of acrylic paint markers, but it didn't work well. After it dried, I went over it with regular acrylic to make it look good, and I'm actually quite happy with this one. This is a study of an osprey that's been done in gouache. These are alphavitarian animals, so they're made-up animals for my main world of Vatar, but they're done in a way that makes them look like they could be plausible, they could really exist, they're quite realistic. This was done intentionally with my Holbein gouache out of my most toxic colors, so I did a poison dart frog person intentionally because I thought it was funny. This was extra paint with a fairly dry brush. I love the way the brush strokes turned out, and a friend said it looked like there were creepy eyes here, so I painted them in gouache and made their wish a reality, and they said, oh no, now it's scary, but I think it's funny. This one is good, except that I know it should have looked different, and I spot all the mistakes in this one. It looks very different than I intended, and whenever I look at it, I can just see a bunch of mistakes. But I also recognize at the same time it looks pretty good, which is a weird juxtaposition. These are studies, composition studies from Framed Ink when I got that book, distilling down the composition, and then I redid the main compositions that were featured in that sort of grayscale with the Copic and the black ink and the white ink, and just focused on the tone and the composition. I made a bunch of circles in this page and later came back in and slowly filled them in. More recently, I finally painted them. When I did this page, I did a bunch of squares, and I only painted or drew in the koalas, and very recently I finished the other squares. It almost seems to tell a story of a magical tropical jungle location, which I didn't intend, but that's pretty fun. For this one, this was a study from Framed Ink as well, but for some reason I did it all in good full color Holbein gouache instead of grayscale, but it studies gouache and composition. Recently I did these ones. I'm really happy with this page actually. I like this one a lot. I'm also really happy with this one, but as I said, I focused on doing more good art in general in the sketchbook, so I'm actually quite happy with the whole thing overall. And this was me actually one of the first tests when I got the Himimiya gouache, which I love. And then this one is more of the mixed ink and fine liners. And these are just different bird studies. These I drew a long time ago back in the before times shopping, while shopping, waiting in line. I would look at different reference on magazines, but change them into cat people. Way later, on completely separate days, I came in and painted each one in gouache. This one is one I painted and drew while I was shopping as well, in several different stores to finish sketching it, and then waiting in a restaurant. I painted a lot of it in with my travel supplies back in the before times, and then I finished it at home. So some of these were done over time, not all at once. Now Ren's the best example of the done over time, not all at once. Extra acrylic paint to not be wasted was used for the hair and the shirt, but I used gouache and fine tack and a lot of different materials, and I actually did not do this all at once. I had him sketched in and not painted in at all for like over a year. He's a character from one of my stories. He's a fashion designer, actually. These two are sketches while waiting at the pharmacy back in the before times that I painted in very recently. And this is a study from a public domain image of a rhino. These were sketched in while waiting in the doctor's office back in the before times a long time ago, and painted in on separate days much more recently at home. This is another sketch I did while shopping and waiting in line back in the before times when I used to bring my sketchbook out, but I painted it in much more recently. Just a nice tiefling. These are also sketches I did back in the before times at the hospital when I was waiting down the road. This is based on a real building somewhere. And then this one I just drew out of my head. But I slowly painted them in over time, and a lot of the work of coloring them in was done at home, but the initial sketches were done out. This one was just done from my imagination. This one was done purely from imagination while waiting at a restaurant in the before times, and I'm really proud of this one. I mostly finished painting it at home, but I started painting it in with my travel supplies as well. This one was sketched back in a hospital at the before times, but I painted it in at home. This is a lady back before, also who is just really happy that I sketched in the before times. When I was waiting at a restaurant, I painted it in entirely with extra acrylic paint that would go to waste, and then I used some Pitt artist pens and other materials. This is just a sketch of like a squirrel person with just a brown ink toy. This is my dog. This is a quoll I drew from a magazine cover in Walmart way back, but I partially painted it there and then I added more later. This mark here is because the eye was drying, but I had to close the book in order to go pay for my groceries. I used to do so many sketches back in the before times. This was another sketch while waiting at a restaurant I did of someone else who was there, though I might have painted in a little bit at home later. These are also sketches I did in the before times while shopping. These ones were 2019, I'm certain. And they were slowly colored in at home and over time and a little bit on the road. I did this Death Slad, which is a Dungeons & Dragons monster, at home. And this was done as extra paint I didn't want to waste. Much more acrylic extra paint that I didn't want to waste. But I find these go together accidentally. And it looks like the portal it teleports through because, you know, Death Slad are extra dimensional. This is more extra paint that was going to get wasted. I made a gradient here. But I love the gradient so much I didn't want to paint on it. Some of these abstract paintings I like just for how they are. I don't want to paint on them. This is a page I filled in a long time ago, just the shapes, and I was going to do like a one-page comic or something. And I did this. I'm not 100% happy with this gouache painted in version, but I just kind of got sick of working on it, so that'll have to do. This one is a really nice design. I really like this guy's design. I don't know his name. I just made this elf dude up, and I did this one at home. I believe this was right around, this was right around the start of the pandemic, I think. And then, I think everything moving forward was done at home so 2020. So this would be the beginning of 2020, and this is 2020. This is a tiefling I did in gouache and a little bit of fine tack. A gouache woman. I think I just really didn't want to do the other eye, so I actually made the hair like that, which is a rare thing for me. Extra acrylic paint, looks like the surface of the water. Some of these abstracts I really like, actually. This one, I thought it would look better than it does, but I don't really like the proportions. I like the way the gouache I mixed up blends together, but I don't like the exact colors I chose or the order I put them in. I don't like the stripes, and I think the proportions look off. The neck is way too long, for example, and I think the wings look too far forward on the anatomy, although I do like some things about this. This is a Nantelli, which is a type of humanoid race I made up. The background's extra acrylic paint that I didn't want to waste, but the rest of it was painted more just when I felt like it, and I worked it up over time. I also used a reference from an old magazine to get the pose and the lighting. These are from public domain images. These are studies, and they're mixed media. There's actually some colored pencil here, watercolor, gouache, fine liners. This one, okay. The orange was extra paint that was going to go to waste. And I love this design. I looked at a lot of inspiring reference and gathered a mood board and did all sorts of stuff, but she's an original design. She doesn't have a name. I haven't worked at her backstory or anything, but I really do like how this one turned out a lot. It's gouache on top of acrylic. This was mostly done with extra paint except for the moon, which I filled in intentionally, just because I wanted to clear off a palette of watercolor and gouache to reuse that same palette to mix new colors. And I painted this weird scene. This was fairly early in the pandemic. I actually went back recently to paint this. This was quite a recent painting. Like I said, I flipped backwards in it and filled some in more recently. This is when I got my Hemi gouache. I'd already set this up on this page. This is more just testing stuff, so I have the swatches, testing different stuff, dotting tools. And this is me trying out my new Stabilo All pencils, which are great. They go on top of anything. They're water soluble. I bought more. And this is a study of a bramble-leaf miner moth. I intended to put something on top of that, but it's weirdly relaxing, this weird abstract gradient I made with extra paint I didn't want to waste, and so I haven't covered it up. These are the calming gouache I mixed. Unfortunately, they went moldy because I put them in a completely sealed bag. I'm now being more careful about mold in my gouache because I've been having issues, but luckily I have isopropyl and I hope to get lavender oil to help even more. I really like this painting. It was already featured in a YouTube video though. These three I'm really proud of. I recently painted them in, although I drew them in pencil quite a while ago. I just wanted to do 3 thumbnails which featured large winged creatures, either koalas or dragons. 1 dragon, 2 koalas, and these are 2 different koalas with different designs. And then I wanted to have good composition. The idea, without looking at any reference, pure imagination, after looking at a lot of inspiring reference to see how it helped me and studying a bit. And I'm really proud of these. And then I also didn't look at reference to paint them in, even though I could have. I just kind of winged it, and I'm actually really happy with how they turned out. The contrast is cool on this, the gray background with the rainbow. I'm really happy with the glow and the way the lighting turned out on this, and I'm really happy with the composition and general looks of this one. So I'm really happy with these 3. This was me testing out when I got some new Daniel Smith paints, these studies. I use watercolor gouache. This one, it turns out the Quin Red, when you use it really thick, is shiny, which is unfortunate because I prefer matte. I prefer matte all the time, matte paint. I'm really happy with this study here. Watercolor and gouache, I believe. The tree turned out amazing. I'm really happy with it. Everything is good, but the tree trunk, I'm really happy with. This one took all day. I don't know why. I just had this inspiration in the morning to do a vampire, Snow White, that is Art Nouveau style. And I just done tons of research. I figured it all out, and I just put a lot of work into this painting, but I'm really happy with it, so I'm glad I did. Oh, I skipped a page. This is a gouache painting of an elf. This is Seba Sevilis. He's one of Macron's 100 children from a story I made up. He's a tiefling. These are some gouache, mostly gouache, a little bit of watercolor I think as well. Gouache and watercolor studies of animals. This is me using the Stabilo All pencil. It actually, I like it how it looks now, but it's not fantastic. It looked worse before. I had to erase the whole thing and start over, but I still kind of wanted to do the merfolk here. This is a study of a screenshot from my favorite movie of all time, Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. It's Hemi gouache and fine liner. This is the Pathfinder magic lore symbol I loved when I was watching a Pathfinder 2nd edition video, so I actually copied it out, interesting. This is fan art for Critical Role from Campaign 1. This is Percy from Vox Machina, and these are all Percy quotes. I meant to do this a long time ago, but interestingly I'm better at art and I have better supplies now, so maybe it's good that I waited. These 2 gouache paintings are studies from toys, and this one's just from like a public domain image, and these are chalk paint tests. This was featured in another video. These are just some little like gouache sketches. Like I painted them on, just sketched. I don't think there was pencil under this one, but I don't think there was under this one. I think I just painted this, and this one is just like a very slight sketch. These ones all actually feature a bit of colored pencil that's very subtle, but this is a study of another artist's work. I don't remember the name, and I just did it like really fast, and suddenly this is just something out of my head. This is a half-hour Franzetta copy challenge. I mixed the paint ahead of time. Here's some of the paint colors. And I didn't include gathering the reference or getting the paints or supplies ready, just the actual painting time. That was the half-hour challenge. This is a study from Witch Hat Atelier Volume 3. The gray is like a wash of my neutral tint. I used this pillbox to mix up some watercolors. One of my neutral tint mixes. I have 2 I mixed up. This could be finished more, but I wanted to move on. But I still really like it. It's a gouache. It's completely from imagination. I was just inspired to just create this scene. I might still finish it a bit more, actually, but I like it. This one is another one that I spent a lot of time on because I felt weirdly inspired. It's based on one image of a woman from an old advertisement, like an old Cosmopolitan magazine, and a bunch of reference of ancient Chinese and ancient Japanese clothing. And then I ended up putting a haiku here because it felt so blank that this page, even though this is the normal page you paint on, was empty. And I took way too long to work on this haiku, but I think it matches well. A picnic is fun to enjoy together now. Fashion and food sing. I don't really like the restrictions of haikus. I think they're silly. Okay, but I still did it weirdly. So maybe sometimes silly restrictions are fun. Staples paper, this is just notes to myself I drew like a million years ago about like the cost of certain papers I liked. These are the Gouache colors and from the Dollarama challenge that aren't very good, and the Inktober. I went over this with better gouache and watercolor so it looks even better than the original version of it. And then this page is the last page, and I won't be showing this page because there's like phone numbers on it, but this page I'm gonna fill in. Hopefully there's enough time in this video and that part will be sped up. So I sped up the footage quite a bit so I can get through it as fast as possible. Now unfortunately when I was recording this originally, the battery on my iPad was actually quite low, and I use my iPad for recording as well because I don't have a separate camera, and I didn't realize and it ran out, so the whole painting process is not here, but a bunch of it is. And I go through this process, it's gouache, as you can see from some of my pre-mixed gouache colors here in one of my palettes, and I'm really happy with the design. Now I didn't record the sketching process, and I did get a bunch of inspiring references to work from. Now I'm not completely happy with the way her face looks, but with the rest of the design I'm quite happy. The metallic paint here is fine tech. And that's it, the whole sketchbook is done. Once again, that's all for this video. If you like my videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to all notifications so you will know when a new video comes up. I aim for new videos every Wednesday, but sometimes life happens and things are delayed. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you with another one very soon.